So this is part three then of the series of the transactional model. It's a third and final part. This part will get into the idea of noise and effects that have to deal with the model. If you're not familiar with the model or watching this before you've watched parts 1 and 2, you need to go back and watch those in order so that you have a foundation for what it is that we're talking about. This is what that foundation should look like, as we've covered the transactional model in terms of the two source receivers, the channels, the messages going back and forth within those channels. That happens within context, and you should understand what those contexts are, those physical, psychological, social, cultural, and temporal. And then, so today we'll get into this idea of noise, and I'll represent noise by this little sparkling kind of bar that's going to come up into the channels and come up. We'll call this noise. And by definition, noise is unwanted sound, or in our case, unwanted data that interferes with our ability to go through and understand, or to find shared meaning, or to get the whole message. It goes through and prohibits our ability to get all of the information that's out there, or distorts information as well. It could go through and take us on a number of different levels that way. And there are, like contexts, where there's 5 different types of context, there are 3 different kinds of noise. Like context, there's physical noise. And then we have psychological noise, and then there's this idea of semantic noise. And so we'll cover all 3 of those. First off, let's talk about physical noise. And you've probably seen this. There's a visual representation of physical noise. If your television has no signal, all it produces is noise, and it looks something like this, and it's moving around, and there's no order or organization to it there. It's electronic noise. We can hear a noise in our headphones or speakers where the amplifier has been turned up so loud, we hear that noise that's overriding what's called the signal level. Visually, we might be overrun by visual noise, by color and contrast and textures and things that are going on that we might find overwhelming, to where we stop trying to find any kind of meaning because there's so much meaning going on that we're overwhelmed that way with visually through that type of noise. Back on the oral idea, maybe you're carrying on a conversation in your car with somebody and the stereo is on, interfering with your ability to hear what it is that they're saying, or maybe you have now noisy neighbors keeping you awake. Or again, inhibiting your ability to go through and listen. So physical noise really is a physical interruption then within our way of processing signals through the senses. Okay, if laryngitis might be a physical noise preventing you to be able to go through and speak that way. Which brings me then to this concept of psychological noise. And like the psychological context, this is where we're going to spend the majority of our time over the course of the semester, is dealing with psychological noise. And that's the voice in your head. While you're talking to somebody, that's the voice in your head that goes through and says, while they're trying to say something, your voice is going, "Wow, look at those green eyes," or "Look at those freckles," or "Look at those tattoos," or "I can't believe they're smoking," or "Oh, are they really wearing a hijab?" or "They're Jewish," or "Why are they wearing that crucifix?" or "Oh, they've got a CTR ring on." All those things that go on while we're trying to carry on a conversation with somebody is psychological noise. If it takes us away from the content that we're engaging in, it pulls us away. It's psychological noise. It's that voice inside your head. Okay, you've all been there on some level. You're shocked at a hair color, or they got a little booger going in and out while they're breathing and talking to you, or you got little zits ready to go, something. And typically, this noise comes about from something that's outside of your scope. Okay, it's unusual, or it's outside of your value system. Okay, and that makes you feel either uncomfortable or curious, or um, it's just a departure, and the brain goes through and is more taken with whatever that might be than the content of the conversation. And now there are ways to go through and manage that psychological noise in interpersonal communication, and we'll be talking, like I said, a lot about that over the course of the semester. The last type of noise is this concept of semantic noise. Now, this is kind of interesting in and of itself, because if you don't know what semantic means, you have semantic noise. Okay, it's a noise of meaning. And we get meaning from lots of things, but mostly we get meaning from language, from words. And if we don't understand what those words are, then we have semantic noise. So, for the sake of teaching online, while you're not aware perhaps that we've made this agreement, but we've made an agreement to do this in English, in American English, okay? And that's the code, okay? The semantics through which we decided to go through and communicate. However, if I change that into a different language, I speak French, for example, I would be violating that code, creating semantic noise. But I can use words that we're both familiar with and still create noise because of multiple meanings. For example, if I say, I want you to hang the babies, no, I got this wrong. I want you to kill the babies, hang the midgets, and fly in a couple of blondes for the martini, you might be offended by what it is that I'm saying because you and I have a shared meaning that these are babies. This is an MG midget. Okay, I'm being politically correct here. These are blondes, and this is a martini. All right? And if that's what your meaning is on each of these, then these terms that I've gone through, kill the babies, hang the midgets, find the blondes, a couple of blondes for the martini, makes no sense to you. Okay, so let me go through these guys here instead, and let me show you actually what I'm talking about. So I'm using a vernacular from film production, and a baby is a lamp, okay? It's a small 250 watt fixture made by a company called Mo Richardson. A midget is at 500 watts. A blonde is a different type of lamp that creates a broad base lighting, okay, to establish kind of a shallow shadow type of lighting that's used to base light. And a martini is the last shot of the day in production. Okay, that's when they start mixing up the martinis. It's the last shot of the day. We're going to wrap things up. It's an old term. Okay, all right. So now that you know that, you have an alternative meaning then to babies, midgets, blondes, and martini. So we no longer have then that semantic noise because I've taken the time to go through and maybe clarify that for you. So semantic noise is a noise of meaning. All right, where we're not understanding the words that are going on, or maybe we're using a syntax, a vocabulary. We have this kind of semantic noise everywhere. If you're not involved in medicine and you find yourself in a medical context and they're shooting terms back and forth, or if you're in a car garage, you're not a mechanic, or if you're in a kitchen of a restaurant and you're not a chef, we've all created our own vocabulary, our own meaning to go through and convey meaning faster. And if we don't understand what that code is, that creates semantic noise. So the three noises then: physical noise, psychological noise, and semantic noise all factor into this idea of the transactional model. Okay, so lastly then, I want to get into this concept of effects. When we communicate, we have an effect, and when somebody else communicates with us, they have an effect on us. And there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of effects that we could probably go through and qualify, but I found that these effects really come about under three different types of headings. We communicate for these three reasons. The first reason is that we're communicating for a cognitive effect. We're communicating for an affective consequence, okay? And then lastly, we're communicating for a psychomotor effect. These are fancy words. Let me get into an explanation of them. Let's talk the cognitive effect. The cognitive effect is, as you well might imagine, since this is a root to a word dealing with cognition, deals with a change in the brain. So we're talking about learning here. We're communicating in order to go through and make some kind of change in how we think. And really, it doesn't have to be anything landmark like what I'm trying to do here with you and teaching you the transactional model. That's a cognitive effect. It could be that maybe I want to go to lunch today and I want to go to Roy's Pizza and you don't know where that is, and I tell you, well, it's down on 7th over by Harmon's. You've learned something. That's a cognitive effect. It's that simple, okay, as it goes. The affective consequence is the emotional side of this thing. So we have the cognitive effect that affects the brain. The affective consequence, for use of an analogy here, affects the heart. Okay, it's something that we feel. So we communicate to have somebody feel something. and we tell somebody that we love them, we're trying to get them to, first the cognitive. I want you to know that I love you, but I also want you to feel that I love you, or I want you to feel that I'm upset with you, or I want you to feel that I'm happy with you, or I want you to feel that I'm nervous for you, or whatever the case might be. It's interesting that we represent that with a heart because that's where we feel it. But honestly, the heart doesn't feel anything. That's actually happens in the brain. It's a long story. It gets into the neurology of things we could talk about later on if you have a question. Then lastly then is the psychomotor effect. And that's where we want to get somebody to do something. Okay, so the biggest psychomotor effect most of us come about, especially if we're online, if we happen to be on Amazon or we're grocery shopping, whatever, is they want us to pay for it, right? The fork out, the credit card, that's a psychomotor response. If you respond to an ad or to a product online and you decide to buy it, they have affected within you through persuasion a psychomotor effect. We're trying that psychomotor effect to get people to put on their seatbelts. Still, after what, 70, 80 years of driving cars, people still aren't putting on their seatbelts and still dying. Okay, psychomotor effect of a healthier lifestyle, of getting more exercise, or eating better. All kinds of resources are thrown into these very ideas to get people to change their minds, okay, which is a cognitive effect, to feel better about themselves, affective, to make a change, that psychomotor response. What's fascinating is, boy, we're still struggling with that. So these don't come by very easily, okay? Well, depending on what level of persuasion we want to get into. And if you want to talk persuasion, take my persuasion class, COM 4020. Shameless plug. Let me get back to this. So cognitive, affective, psychomotor, you can remember them better perhaps as this. Cognitive is we're communicating to learn. Affective is we're communicating to feel. And psychomotor is we're communicating to do. All right? Hope that clears it up for you. So that's it. That is the transactional model as we'll apply this theory to everything we're going to be talking about throughout the semester. If you don't understand this, and you won't the first time through here, okay, and that's okay. You need to go back through all three parts here and make sure that you get it. And if you illustrate this and take notes, that'll help you go through. If you have any questions, you know where to find me through email, through my contact on Canvas, or better yet, post your question on a discussion thread so everybody can benefit from your question and we'll have a discussion from there. All right? Talk to you later.